I'm Sue O'Connell. Tonight on Greater Boston, Boston's Pride Parade is back under new leadership. The head of the group hosting this year's celebration joins me ahead. Then the public outcry over the PGA Tour's decision to partner up with Saudi-backed LIV Golf. And MIT professor and author Zeynep Ton on how companies benefit from paying their employees more. It's a troubling time for the LGBTQ plus community, with threats of violence and a wave of homophobic and transphobic laws prompting the Human Rights Campaign to declare a national emergency in the United States. But there is one big reason to celebrate. Here in Boston, the Pride Parade is finally back. It returns this weekend for the first time in 3 years after the pandemic forced cancellations in 2020 and 2021, and in 2022, the former Boston Pride organization dissolved over complaints of racism and transphobia. Now, a new group is in charge, Boston Pride for the People. President Adrianna Boulin joins me now. Welcome, Adrianna. Happy Pride to you.
Thank you. Happy Pride to you, Sue.
So tell me, first of all, what's new about this Pride Committee? And I know that people have been making the association to the pop-up Pride last year, but tell me who Boston Pride for the People is.
So Boston Pride for the People started last September, and what we started from was a year of a lot of people saying, wow, we are the ones that have to show up and be what we've been asking for now that this organization has dissolved. And so you mentioned Pop-Up Pride, which a number of organizers, some that are affiliated with Boston Pride from the People and others, came together to do a Pop-Up Pride celebration, and there have been different activations throughout the city. But after those activations and all the work that people did, we thought, okay, let's come together and think about what this could actually look like, what we might need to do, and how we could go about this. And where I loved that we started was doing some visioning to understand, and this gets to the what's different, or what I see as different, is what our foundation has been. So our focus as an organization is to plan the yearly parade and festival, one, and two, to uplift the things going on throughout our city that are led by LGBTQ leaders and organizers and organizations throughout the year. And we do that through four main ways. Through commemoration. We recognize that Pride started as a protest. People risked their lives, lost their lives, and experienced a lot of harm for us to live a lot of the freedoms that we live right now, and we want to honor that and show that. The second is education. There are a lot of freedoms that we as a community and in our communities are able to experience, and there's a lot of oppression that we're still experiencing. Our communities are still under attack. Folks in the trans community, our youth are still fighting to be themselves, for affirming care. So there's still education to be done, and we want that to also be at the foundation. So commemoration, education, empowerment. There's so much change that needs to happen in our community, in our communities, and we are the ones to make that change, but we can't be the ones if we don't have the resources, the access, and aren't empowered and put in leadership roles and supported in those roles to actually make change. So we want whatever activities and things we do to empower our community. And last is celebration. We're worthy of joy, and there's so much to be happy about, and there's so much joy that can be shared and spread. And not having a celebration like this since 2019, there's so much to be said, so much to be said. So what's different is really what's at the foundation that I shared of everything we do. See that as different than it's been and feel like it can grow.
So one of the challenges that you've had, your organization has had, you know, I've been joking with folks, I'm an institutionalist, right? So I'm about you got a problem, go to that institution, go on the inside and seep into it and try and change it that way. Yeah. That opportunity wasn't necessarily available to you folks planning this Pride celebration. You had to build stuff from scratch.
Yeah.
And you had brought a lot of people to the table, a lot of constituencies. How has it been navigating building something from scratch in this world that we're in right now?
It's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot, and it's more than I knew, and I think we as an organizing committee knew when we said, yes, we're passionate, we love this work, it's our community, it's in our heart space, and so we signed up for it. But yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to be inclusive. It's a lot of work to be accessible. It takes a lot of work, and I'd love for things to all happen at once. And what I'm also learning, what we're learning, is it doesn't happen all at once. And so how do you keep the work going and set goals and build capacity to accomplish what you want to continue to accomplish? But it's been a beautiful process to connect and engage with people and hear people feeling happy that they're actually being asked what Pride looks like for them and what they want to see.
If folks want to come into the city this weekend and celebrate Boston Pride, what are some of the things that they can expect?
Okay, so a couple of things. So our parade starts at 11 a.m. It starts in Copley, marches down to Boston Common. In Boston Common, there are two festival areas. One at Boston Common that are all ages. We have different areas for youth, aging older adults, families. We have a QT BIPOC marketplace. We have a BIPOC marketplace. There are so many different areas. Our City Hall Plaza location is 21 plus, and we have vendors there. We have a stage there, a beer garden. There's just so much there, quiet areas. We're trying to create spaces for everyone. And there's also so many things going on in the city. And so just we're seeking to spread joy in the
I
city.
know that one of the walks that you talked and talks that you walked was involving yourself with businesses and organizations that aren't just here for the money or just aren't here to wave a flag. What are some of the things that the standards that you applied to people participating in the Pride celebrations?
What's really important to us in building genuine allies in this work with partners is ensuring that they haven't contributed to any anti-LGBTQ legislation, anti-abortion legislation. We look at indices like the HRC index and other disability and inequality index to see where these businesses are and use that as a framework to guide our interactions and partnerships with them.
So is Pride still important?
Absolutely. To me, Pride is still important. And through our planning of this, to me, it's important to our city, too.
Talk about what the message is that you would like straight allies who come into the city or who are watching and want to participate. What's the one message you would like to leave a Pride celebration with?
Center our LGBTQ plus community. This is a space to celebrate and center our community. That's what we want our activities to look like. And we want people to engage and support our community in that way. So as a straight ally or anyone coming to support this work, show up and center members of our community. And there's so many ways to do that.
Well, you look very rested for someone who has a big event coming up. So I appreciate you and all the work that Boston Pride for the People is doing. Adrianna Boulin, thanks so much. Happy Pride.
Thank you so much, too. Happy Pride.
For a list of all the Pride events planned for Boston and beyond, you can head over to gbhnews.org. Next up, a surprise new merger agreement is rocking the world of golf and thrusting the sport into the middle of a human rights crisis. The PGA Tour has just announced a partnership with a Saudi-backed rival, LIV Golf. The two organizations have been at odds since LIV was founded way back in 2021, and its leadership dangled a multi-million-dollar contract in front of several of the PGA players to try and get them to defect. Some big names did, but many did not, citing the Saudi government's long track record of human rights abuses, including the murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi, and questions about the country's involvement in the 9/11 attacks. And PGA branded itself as the moral alternative to LIV. Well, now the PGA's decision to join forces with them is leaving players and fans feeling betrayed.
I recognize that people are going to call me a hypocrite, and anytime I've said anything, I said it with the information I had at that moment, and I said it based on someone that's trying to compete for the PGA Tour and our players. And so I accept those criticisms, but circumstances do change, and I think that, you know, in looking at the big picture and looking at it this way, that's what got us to this point.
Shira Springer, a longtime sports journalist and lecturer at MIT's Sloan School of Management, joins me now to discuss. Shira, we were talking earlier, LIV, LIV, who knows? Who are these people? What happened?
Yeah, this certainly wasn't much competition in the sense that it didn't have a lot of name recognition outside of golf circles. It wasn't like LIV was beating down the door of the PGA, but the PGA certainly felt that there was enough of a threat there that they needed to merge, and really it all comes down to money. Saudi's public investment fund agreed to invest an awful lot of money in the PGA. The head of that fund now becomes the chairman of this merged tour, and Monahan, who you saw there, becomes the CEO, and that's the arrangement.
What happens to the golfers who didn't take the deal in the beginning? Some golfers got a lot of money. Some said, no, I'm going to stay with the PGA, but now they're with LIV. Do they get money too?
They should. It's unknown yet whether they will, or what the compensation will be, and quite frankly what the punishment will be for those PGA golfers who essentially defected to the LIV Golf Tour for millions upon millions of dollars. But we do know, for obvious reasons, that those golfers who stayed loyal to the PGA are not happy. Among that number is Rory McIlroy, who reportedly turned down $300 million to stay loyal to the PGA Tour. And he said in statements, I believe it was earlier today, that he felt like a sacrificial lamb because of that. And he was very angry, still hated LIV, but being a bit pragmatic, he understands the financial implications, and that this investment by the Saudis will put the PGA and, quite frankly, men's professional golf on more solid financial footing. I think he's trying to make the best of a really bad, really disappointing situation, because he was very, very outspoken in his loyalty to the PGA.
All right, let's get to some of the sports washing accusations here. Connecticut Senators Chris Murphy and Richard Blumenthal today, they had something to say that condemned this partnership.
I think it's a really serious thing to have a foreign dictatorship in charge of a major U.S. sports league. Let's be honest, the Saudis aren't buying the PGA because they love golf. They're buying the PGA because they want to erase their dizzying campaign of political repression.
If PGA really wants to make amends for this really absolutely abhorrent merger, it ought to be supporting the 9/11 families rather than merging with an organization that tried to smear them, as the LIV organization did.
So I saw someone on social media yesterday say, so I guess we'll just all stop buying gasoline as well. I mean, what's the reaction to the idea that the Saudis are trying to fix their brand or burnish their brand by being involved in American golf or world international golf?
Yeah, I mean, I think people see it for what it is, this sports washing, right? They are trying to change their image, global image, by buying into sports and basically controlling men's professional golf now. And this is not their only attempt at sports washing. They basically bought Cristiano Ronaldo, one of the most well-known soccer players in the world. He now plays in Saudi Arabia. And another high-profile soccer player, Karim Benzema, is leaving to play in Saudi Arabia for big bucks. And the Saudis clearly see sports as a way to put a, we'll say, friendlier face on their authoritarian regime and their human rights, and to basically cover up their human rights violations. And people recognize that. People see that. But as I will go back to Rory McIlroy, he said it's hard to compete with people who have more money, and who, quite frankly, who will probably always have more money.
So did the Saudis invent this?
No.
How long has this been going on, this sports washing we speak of?
I mean, I was going to say, I mark it as beginning in some ways with the 1936 Berlin Olympics, what is often called the Nazi Games, because these are the Olympics that Hitler used to spread propaganda about the Nazi regime. It may have been, and there are probably examples that have, where it went on before that. But to me, that is sort of a real turning point in the sense of when a country, when a government, when a dictatorship uses sports to project a certain image that is contrary to what's going on inside the country, where they use it to sports wash their politics, basically. So I trace it to that, but it's also been going on a lot recently. You have Russia hosting the World Cup, you have Russia hosting the Winter Olympic Games, and I was at those Winter Olympic Games in Sochi in 2014, and what I vividly remember is 3 days before they ended, what does Putin do? He invades Crimea. So, using sports as a cover is not uncommon. Beijing Winter Olympics. So recently, the Men's World Cup in Qatar. This is not new. This has been going on for a while, and it will keep going on because, bottom line, sports is a business. And whether it's FIFA or the IOC, or elsewhere, or golf, they will follow the money because they need that money, and they need people who are to be aligned, quite frankly, with people who are going to invest lots in their sports.
I've always been amazed at folks who are sports fans and don't understand the business part of it, that, when your favorite player goes to another team, you're personally hurt, but it's all about the money. So what is a golf fan supposed to do? Say you're a huge men's golf fan. Do you expect they're going to boycott? Do you think it'll just be like business as usual? I'm going to keep doing what I do, watching what I watch?
I think the men's golf fans will keep watching what they watch. I don't see it. It has not historically been a particularly protest-oriented fandom, right? So I don't think the outspokenness will come, or there will be much outspokenness from fans of men's professional golf, but there has been when it comes to fans of the Olympics, fans of the World Cup. And I think the more that this goes on, the more that you see authoritarian regimes use these big international sports events to sports wash, I think there will be more protests, and that's the fandom I think that you will see more protests and more outspokenness from.
Is there any upside to this? Is there any, we're talking about Jamal Khashoggi again. We're talking about the connection of Saudi Arabia and 9/11, which for years we didn't speak about. Is there an upside here? Is there an opportunity here?
I think awareness always brings an upside, right? And again, you mentioned we're talking about all of these elements and aspects of Saudi Arabia that we weren't talking about before, or weren't sort of top of mind. So anything that brings those human rights violations and other issues top of mind, I think, is valuable. But I don't think there's a tremendous opportunity. This comes in cycles, right? So this will be the news for 24, 48, 72 hours, and then it will fade away, and then the next incident of sports washing will occur, and it'll come to the fore again and then recede. Nothing is going to change until the policies of, awarding big sports events, or other policies in terms of the governance of major sports leagues change. And so this is going to be a top of mind now, fade away, but there has to be some systemic change, or just some change in governance of these leagues, of these major international sporting organizations, for there to be real change.
All right, Shira Springer, I'm sure we'll have you back to talk about this again.
Yes, I have a feeling you will have me back for this.
Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate you. Thanks.
Thank you.
To say it's been a crazy few years for the American job market would be a bit of an understatement, with mass layoffs and then that so-called great resignation rocking industry after industry. The pandemic was the beginning of many of these changes, and the economic downturn and even the work ethic of younger generations has taken much of the blame. But one local professor is pointing the finger at employers in her new book, The Case for Good Jobs: How Great Companies Bring Dignity, Pay, and Meaning to Everyone's Work. MIT professor of operations management Zeynep Tom looks at how employers treat and pay their workers. She joins me now. What perfect timing to be talking about this. Welcome.
Thank you.
So it's not just about the pay, but talk a little bit about how you sort of infiltrated as a worker and as someone looking for work, how companies, especially retail operations, were managing people, and what you learned.
Yeah, so most leaders want to win, right? And they know that winning requires a great team that's set up to succeed. But what I've learned working with so many companies, analyzing them, is that so many leaders, especially in settings like retail and services, they think that they can't afford to pay their employees enough to be able to create that team. So what I have found in my research, and lately with Good Jobs Institute, the nonprofit that I started in 2017, is that low pay is actually very expensive for companies, a lot more than leaders might assume.
Why do they think that, though? I mean, why do they think it's a good idea, or efficient, or good for their bottom line to pay someone the least amount possible not have flexible work hours, not be able to accommodate the stuff that happens to all of us in life, and then just go through trying to replace them, which in this market and in prior markets, it's too hard to do. Why do they think it's a good idea?
That's a great question. Turnover is so expensive. Why on earth would they be operating that way? Because for decades, business leaders have been taught that labor is just another cost. Market pay is the right pay, even if it's not a living wage. Lean and mean is what drives efficiency, and this type of mindset prevents them from even imagining operating any other way. But what I show in the book is that turnover is really expensive. There are direct costs associated with turnover, but then there are all sorts of costs related to lost sales, higher waste, low productivity, and when you operate with high turnover, there are some good management practices that you just can't execute and you can't serve the customers well. How many restaurants, how many retail stores have we seen with the close signs? Right? That's lost sales right there.
You make a point, I believe in the book, at least in the article that Caramilla did in the Boston Globe, about being on the retail floor and seeing that the clothes, the product is not out on the rack, it's in the back, because there weren't enough workers. And that sort of extrapolates to other industries, right?
Yeah, I came across this problem about bad jobs. I'm an operations professor, so I didn't start out looking at jobs, and I was looking at retail supply chains. And what I found was one of the biggest problems in retail supply chains was the last 10 years of the supply chain where retailers dropped the ball. Products will be misplaced in the back room, not on the selling floor. Inventory data will be inaccurate. And one of the biggest reasons was low investment in people. Stores didn't have enough people, or they weren't experienced. They were making mistakes all the time. Again, and this happens over and over again in so many different industries. It's not just retail. Any industry that operates with high turnover have these problems. They won't be lost sales, but they will be mistakes in a hospital. They could be lost lives in a healthcare setting. So yes, this happens anywhere where we experience high turnover.
So I can already hear someone at home thinking, well, if the CEOs just took a little bit of the money that they were making and put it back into the operation of their businesses by way of paying the employees more and investing in training for the employees, this problem would be solved. So why aren't they doing that?
I think the CEOs should look at what their low-wage workers are making and compare that to the living wage in their area and see, are they able to live? Right? What can we do to make their work better? And it's not just because you want to treat people right, you have to treat the people right, because you need good employees. You need a good team to be able to succeed. So I think CEOs should look at their workforce, look at their job design, and see what can we do to be able to create that winning team.
So I have heard more than one CEO or boss or small business owner, when they're hiring someone, even if they're hiring someone to work on their household staff, say something like, well, we all have to agree not to pay more than this because it will ruin the hiring market, right? If we pay this person $15 instead of $10, or this person $30 instead of $25, it'll put the whole thing out of whack. Is it wrong? I mean, shouldn't it just all be out of whack? Shouldn't somebody just say we're going to pay that amount?
Look, I think fairness and compression are real issues in so many companies. That's a fact. However, the good companies that I have studied, like Costco, like H-E-B, they look at their workforce and let's say, what is the highest that we can pay? And while making a profit and offering our customers the best prices. So the mentality should be, what is the highest we can pay to get the right team to be able to serve customers better? And how do we create fairness in our organization?
So I'm a small business owner. I used to have a staff. I don't have a staff anymore. But when I had a staff, I used to use what I called the Starship Enterprise from Star Trek model, right? So when you watch a Star Trek episode on the bridge, every officer on the bridge can at least do the minimum requirement of every other position on the bridge. So the therapist can fly the ship. The engineer can fire the weapons. You make a point like that it should be important for employers to invest in employees being able to do more than just their job.
Yes, and part of my good job strategy is investing in people, higher pay, etc. But the other part, the secret sauce actually, is to increase the productivity of workers by cross-training them, by empowering them, by simplifying their work. And one of my favorite examples of this from a recent small business example, you mentioned you're thinking about a small business, is Moe's Original Barbecue in Maine. Is the owner of 2 stores, and he was able to make huge pay investments, which were scary, but he also cross-trained employees. He also simplified menu. He also did so many other things, and now that pay raise is an investment with a significant return for his small business, and his life, his employees' lives changed, and the owner's life changed too, because he doesn't have to work 60 hours a week anymore.
What about some of the other benefits? My company, I also work for NBC Universal. They have pet bereavement time. I recently lost a pet. I had mocked the pet bereavement time, and then I used it this week. Those kind of benefits, plus my free coffee I get every morning, they mean something to me. Is that also part of the good job strategy?
Of course, it is part of the good job strategy, but for workers who don't make a living wage, if they can't put food on the table and a roof over their heads, benefits like discounts on coffee or pizza parties, they're just a Band-Aid on a wound.
What are employers, what are CEOs saying to you about your book and about your work?
So after my first book came out, so many company leaders came out and said, we want to do this, but we're scared. We have doubts. How do we start? Where do we start? What change do we make first? So this book is on why you should do this, how to do it, and the tools to get started.
Who should we be looking at? What companies are leading?
In the change efforts, or the companies that have always been leading are companies like Costco, Quick Trip, and Progressive Insurance, Four Seasons Hotels in a wide range of industries. Recently, there are companies ranging from $60 billion retailer Sam's Club to Moe's Original Barbecue that I talk about in the book, and call centers at Quest Diagnostics.
Zainab, it's a fascinating read. I really enjoyed you coming in and talking with us, and I hope you get to revolutionize the way we pay workers. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
The book, again, is The Case for Good Jobs. That's it for tonight, but come back tomorrow. The Massachusetts Lottery is looking to compete with sports betting in the state, but is it doing more harm than good? We'll hear from 2 experts who argue the state is preying on lower-income residents. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thanks for watching. Good night.
When we tell